Hey everybody, how you doing?
Hi, Paul.
All right, I guess we'll wait a moment for Irfan to join.
Yeah, Paul. Hello, folks.
Hey Irfan, how you doing?
Great. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
I think we have enough presence, right? We can start.
Yeah.
I see there are two agenda items today, uh, and both are about two pending PRs. So, are there any open comments or something that needs to be closed on these PRs? I haven't actually visited my own PRs in some time.
So I approved your PR to refactor the Helm chart, Wangya.
Yeah.
I was wondering for the group when I saw that this was on the agenda, whether we had someone else identified that was interested in.
Sorry, Paul. I cannot hear the last word.
Yeah, it kind of lost on us, Paul. You have to probably repeat.
Sorry about that. Zoom continually crashes on my laptop now, which is super fun. I was wondering if we had someone else besides myself that was interested in taking a final pass through the Helm chart refactor. I think it's ready to go, but I didn't want to approve an LGTM at the same time, since some communities consider that kind of aggressive. So I wanted to solicit a review from someone else.
Great. Okay. So I also did some tests, and the test including the cluster level and the namespace level. So both cases passed. So I hope that I can get some comment from Marie, from Toshi. Yeah.
Awesome. Does one of you guys want to put your hand up to do a review?
Yeah, Gonga, I'll have a look at it in a day.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next one on the agenda is my doc PR, which was documentation about the replica scheduling preferences. I see that only Gwangya did put some comments, and one of your comments, Gwangya, what you were experiencing seems to be a issue or a bug, which I think can be opened as an issue separately and can be tackled as part of that.
Okay.
Okay, and if there are any problems with the documentation, you can point them out. I saw one which I'll fix and update the PR.
Yeah.
Anybody else who wants to either go ahead with the review or then approve for merge?
Yeah. So here I have a question. So what is the release plan for Federation 0.2? Do we have some timeline for this release? I found that we only released the RC1 package, but I don't see any future plan for when to release the version of 0.2.
So Most of the things in the 0.0.2 milestone are done. I think the largest one that's remaining is the simplified job scheduling. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we noticed, which unfortunately I don't think we've had a chance to talk to you about yet, Irfan, about your PR, is it looks like that poll is adding the first case of having two fields being set on override. And we were kind of not sure whether
Paul,
that meant.
you're fading in and out. I think your microphone is in a strange place.
Okay, is that better?
That is much, much better.
All
So,
right.
yeah, I got what you were pointing at, Maru. Sorry, Paul. That is Maru's comments, which I had a look earlier. And today I was actually trying to have a look at adding the possibility of testing multiple override fields. That actually also points to possibility of arbitrary overriding multiple fields or different fields. So earlier, I think Shashi had a go at trying to have generic way of overriding the whole thing. So the generic way would be like whatever we are specifying in the template, the same thing or the whole structure is considered or the whole API is considered for override. That somehow did not work out earlier. So that is one open issue we can say as of now. So this can be done in two ways. Either we try to go ahead and find a generic way of overriding anything out of the template spec, or we just add a possibility of multiple field overrides as of now. I see that the possibility of multiple field overrides is much more simpler than the latter. So
Yeah, I guess one thing that I've been wondering is, since the that's like the final remaining large development item. One thing that I'll share with the group that I've personally been wondering about is, in other projects in the Cube ecosystem, we've found it to be really effective to like have a weekly release for a patch version. And in general, I think it would be easier for folks that are trying to adopt the project if we kind of released early and often. I would wonder what folks felt about releasing in 0.0.2, and then there is no reason that we couldn't release in 0.0.3, for example, next week if we had some closure on the open question remaining about job scheduling. What do folks think about that?
I would personally be fine with that. I do not have an objection to that.
Okay. In general, my feeling is releasing as often as possible helps get new features to people as they're developed. So if we're okay with that, I think that would be a good way to go.
Okay. Okay.
In a PR review that I did, I suggested that we needed further discussion, and I'm not sure it's going to be fairly technical. I'm not sure this is necessarily the best venue for it, but there's not just one open issue on the job scheduling, there's two, and they're kind of linked because overriding completions is not really possible unless you do things in a certain order. Because if you create a template and then create overrides, potentially the jobs will be created in the target clusters, and because completions is not mutable, that means that you can't actually override it. And so, as per my comment, if you actually want to override completions, it's probably the case that we'll have to have a way of blocking propagation until the scheduler has done its work. And that would certainly support like the idea that we don't want to wait on releasing 002, because I think that there's more work than just overrides. It's actually figuring out a strategy for supporting scheduling, coordination with propagation.
So since that conversation might get really, really detailed, what do folks think about setting up like a one-off where we can discuss that on this Zoom, but keep going for now with the stuff on the agenda and tackle those like really deep technical things in a special conversation?
Yeah, we can do that. If there are other items to talk now, we can continue, and I believe there would be time left, and we can revisit this in today's meeting itself.
Okay. So the other item that I put on the agenda is really not actually about your pull request, Irfan, but something that I've noticed on like doc pull requests is using your pull as an example, just a representative example, Irfan. I feel like the doc in your pull is really good in the sense that we have zero documentation actually merged for that feature into the repo at this point. And in general, I feel like it's best to get imperfect doc merged, especially since we have a rather low amount of it at this point, and then make corrective changes, in a follow-up that, for example, the original author doesn't have to do. So what I was kind of wondering about is for example, Wangya, you put a few comments on the pull requests that are some kind of formatting changes and narrative changes. I wondered if you might be open to like let's merge Irfan's pull request because it adds a lot of value, and in a follow-up, someone else, and you could even do this yourself if you wanted to, could make changes that kind of correct some of the details and maybe make the formatting a little nicer. But I tend to feel like the doc is most useful when it's in the repo, and people generally won't look to pulls to find docs that haven't merged. What do folks think about that?
Yeah, I also think so that this document can have a lot to help people to understand how the RSP works. So, yeah, so I think that it's okay to merge this. But I still have one question for this because I post a comment there, and if we set both minimal replica and max replicas, how the RSP can handle this case. I didn't find too much detail about this, so maybe we can just merge this PR first and post another PR to have more detail about how does this case works.
I can add some example to point that detail out also, Wangya.
Yeah, okay, great. I also found that you already have a test case such as the job plan and test, and in the test case, there are really a lot of cases. Yeah, it also includes this case.
Yep, correct. So what my notion is that the documentation and the examples in the documentation will point out some basic cases and some cases which appraise the user about the feature. About the more detailed stuff and possibility of what all can be done by this can be pointed out through code. Or, I mean, they can have a look at code also. And many use cases might come out from their usage, which are already not part of the feature or in the code. So that's how ideally it should work.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and LGTM.
Paul, wait a minute. So there is one other comment which seemed like a valid one from Gwangya. Let me update that. After that, I'll post that it's ready for merge.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, I think if we can work to get doc pools, merged, though they may be not quite perfect, and avoid things sitting. That would be great to, help us build out our docs for people as they try to use this stuff. And that's all I wanted to talk through on that one as an example.
Yeah, and I know that Shashi also has been, trying to put a set of documentation for the linked set of features that he has been working in the last couple of months. He has just been marked with different issues, either in external DNS or core DNS or somewhere else, which are not necessarily inside Federation V2, which has been stopping him from putting in a documentation which might explain the whole feature end to end. So
yeah, and I'm very sensitive to that too, and appreciate all the tracking down all these odd behaviors with external DNS and different providers. I put a doc up for multi-cluster service DNS record that I see there are some comments from Shashi and Wanya that I'll try to address today, but I want to be pitching in with that and actually have some diagrams that I've produced for how the DNS feature works that as a follow-on to this poll, which is number 311, that adds API doc. I was hoping to basically put about the same information into a markdown file along with a diagram that I don't have as much knowledge as the man Shashi himself, but maybe get some basic information in there that that we can add detail to going forward.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for that, Paul.
Yeah, and apologies, it was there in my task list since a month, and I'm facing some issues. If I put it out, everyone will start getting the same issues. I think I need some working code to put out that's where I'm blocked right now. So I hopefully it should go away soon. So I'm working towards that. But overall, I think I appreciate that. Whatever documentation is there, for others to try, I think it would be good. If others also can try to solve it, maybe it would be good.
Yeah, I'm happy to help with doc stuff as I'm going through this stuff myself and determining what the right way to put these things into diagrams that I'll donate. Which I donated the initial one. I got a couple more queued up that are on the way.
Cool, thanks.
Shashi, is this an issue with the Federation V2 code base, or is this something with
no.
DNS?
Yeah, it's not with Federation V2. It's with some things related to core DNS and then the external DNS. So initially I tried my working examples with core DNS, but it seems there are some bugs in core DNS and also in external DNS. So the code base I am not able to, I even raised a pull request, but seems like because of each vendor's lot of other code, we cannot migrate it to etcd v3 and we had to live with etcd 2. And there are a couple of complications there. So, and in case of global DNS, again, I am stuck with we cannot write CNAMEs there because we are writing a text records for every record there. So CNAME cannot coexist there with text record. So I think we might need to introduce a few more features like either CNAME or alias, something like that. So I think I'm blocked not in Federation V2, in external DNS and coordinate kind of.
Okay. Is there an issue in external DNS that tracks this?
They seems to have solved it, but it was not exposed earlier. Like right now, we can program any DNS endpoint. So, but it was earlier limited to how you can define in a service. So it was all hidden. Now it is all exposed. The scenario which I am trying to write, like I was directly trying to write CNAME in Google Cloud DNS. That is not supported by the DNS provider. So we might need to use an alternative, like writing an alias record or so. So I think those are like maybe not explored features. Okay, I think there is a way already identified by the external DNS to solve those kind of problems. I think we are encountering that right now.
Okay.
Did I answer that, Ivan?
Yes, thank you. That helps.
Okay, so okay, no new items on agenda for today, right? We can come back to the discussion about the need of enabling propagation or time propagation that Maru did pointed out on my PR. And
Just for the record,
apologies. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
sorry, there's latency on my side. I was just going to say I will try to capture some of this discussion around the external DNS stuff in the notes, just for folks that might be looking in there.
Sure. Yeah, Maru, I was saying apologies. I did intend to reply to the comments that you had put on my PR, but sort of last 2 days I was off for personal reasons, and the comments came in just before the weekend. So about the propagation, I actually had sort of thought about it, and what you are suggesting is a useful feature. But what I thought is, for now, we can have a similar approach that we took for the jobs feature when we did enable the job templates and propagation of for jobs. So what we did decide is that it is supposed to be there in user documentation, that if they need to use this feature, that at that point of time the override should be created before the template. So the
Right,
similar
but-
approach. Let me point it out.
ahead.
So the code that you saw and the comment that you have put, actually that is not needed. So the code currently mandates that if the template does not exist, it will not do scheduling. So I'll just remove that piece of code, and that should work, and it should be able to go ahead and do the scheduling, create overrides, and create the placements before the template is created. And for now, it seems it might solve this particular issue, but about the need of enabling propagation based on some other conditions, that also seems to be useful. So what I'm suggesting is we can track it separately, like these can be two different features which can be done separately, rather than as a prerequisite to this particular PR. Does it seem okay to do, or?
Kinda. I mean, to be honest, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the value of job scheduling. If the user has to create replica scheduling preferences and then have it create overrides, and then once those overrides are created, then you can create a template. And like as an automated feature, I'm kind of fuzzy on why this is valuable versus just having something that isn't controller based that determines how you'd like, a job spread across available clusters. Just seems really, like the user experience seems really funny. Is this something that your users are willing to accept?
Yeah, so the more useful feature that is part of my plan is to have the automated rebalancing of jobs. So, and that is a bit complicated because of this prerequisite that the completions cannot be updated in the clusters where the jobs are already created. So that is the useful feature that the users are actually interested in. And the ones that the simplified job scheduling currently is, as you mentioned, is more like a distribution of the jobs among the clusters. And it, with whatever we are doing, it seems like more of working around with prerequisites. So as I said, what the usefulness of propagation based on a condition is certainly needed. What I was just suggesting is that it need not be prerequisite to this PR. So we can do it in steps. That's what I was trying to suggest.
I guess my concern is more that I'm not sure that scheduling jobs really makes a huge amount of sense. Like what you're describing seems better suited to an entirely separate mechanism where you schedule pods and you don't have this restriction on completion as being immutable, and you just manage, like, you basically have another mechanism that handles federated jobs separate from cluster local jobs. I just want to put it out there because it seems like having to work around the limitations that jobs imposes. Like why bother? Why not just have something where you have a lot more flexibility in how you're scheduling things? Because effectively a job is just a pod that has some controller coordination.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested in hearing from Dario, given I understand he was involved in implementing jobs, and whether he thinks that it's a good idea to just try to layer something on top of it versus having something that's more multi-cluster friendly.
I'm not sure I fully understood the issue here. I remember that when I implemented jobs, the problem was the order that is used to override the jobs, right? Fundamentally, the only thing you can do with the order at that time was the fact that you can only templatize what you can modify. And since there were some immutable fields, you cannot templatize the immutable fields. To me, it was only a problem of the order of the template is applied on the definition of the job. Now,
that totally makes sense when we're just talking about, like I just want this job to run, and I want it to run in some clusters, and I'm manually deciding where things go. Then it's like, well, I mean, you're controlling the flow anyway. So if there's this restriction or that restriction, it's kind of fine. But what I'm more concerned about is when we talk about automatic scheduling, suddenly like you have to fight against what the job's like controller is trying to do. And I guess my sense is that like if I wanted to schedule jobs, then I wanted to maybe rebalance, because maybe my presumption is you have clusters that are running like I guess the Google example where you have applications that are running, and then you're running batch jobs kind of where you have the time and space to do it on whatever cluster. And then as load spikes, you're going to move those batch workloads somewhere else where there's capacity, or just spin it down entirely. In that kind of scenario, I don't know that having like immutable completions makes sense. Does that scenario make a bit more sense? Like you want to be able to say, well, I don't want to actually run, I want to have, the existing jobs, maybe I want some of them to complete, but maybe I just want to reduce the number drastically so that only ones that are a certain percentage along, I don't want to lose those results, are going to complete, and everything else I'm going to shut down and move somewhere else. Is that compatible with the conception of jobs as you understand?
yeah, it is compatible, but in that case, if I understood correctly, what you said is having immutable fields does not make sense anymore, right? So fundamentally, this something that we may define as the system should modify the spec and recreate the job, which is strange, I understand, because fundamentally at the end you end up having a job that is different than the previous job just because you had to modify the immutable fields.
So Dario, what Maru is pointing out is it as that currently, if you see the high-level schedulers, the architecturally what they are trying to leverage is the propagation mechanism using the low-level APIs. So what job scheduler is also doing is trying to create local jobs. So a job per cluster for that given spec. And we see problems with that. And what I am trying is to work around those problems as of now. So what he's trying to understand is, or what his question is that, have you seen such scenarios where the high level scheduling or the automated scheduling of jobs is useful? Am I right, Maru?
Not so much as it useful. Like, I think it's definitely, like, when you say high level scheduling, you're talking about like multi-cluster, like the stuff that you're proposing.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm not questioning whether that's useful. It's more that having to work around like the immutable completions field of the existing job type seems kind of strange to me, given that we really want more flexibility when we're talking about multi-cluster. Like, jobs as a thing wasn't really designed to be rescheduled to a different cluster. It's kind of like an all or nothing thing. And I think we want more flexibility than that. I'm not suggesting
Somebody
that
is very loud on typing. Can I just mute, please? I'm sorry. Not sure who's that. Sorry, Maru, to interrupt you. Okay, go ahead, please.
Anyway, I guess I'm just putting it out there. I'm not sure that this is necessarily something we decide in discussion. It just might be worth investigating whether we have some sort of alternate controller that, you know, just deals with things differently. I mean, if I think about how you handle things like completions, does it really make, I don't know. I mean, there's a cost to that, so I'm not suggesting, oh yeah, we must, you know, do something separate. I'm just raising the possibility that using jobs in its current form may be counterproductive. It might be worth just exploring that.
What I can say, sorry.
Go ahead, Dario.
What I can say for our internal use of jobs is that we assume that sometimes they can fail, and when we cannot retrieve the status of the job, simply we rerun it. So I would say that in a multi-cluster environment, if we for some reason need to reschedule the job, you can eventually simply rerun without having a huge amount of flexibility that I would, anyway, today we don't have it. So
maybe we could just describe a scenario where, you know, we have a job running in a cluster and we're going to reschedule that work somewhere else. And essentially we just kill the job and we record, you know, how many completions there were and use that to compute how many completions we still need to perform somewhere else. And that's would be sufficient.
I would say that if you need to reschedule the job, all the partial completion that you have must be forgot, and you have to restart all the jobs in the new cluster, right? Because normally, at least for what we do internally, is that when we start jobs, we need to collect data from the output of the pod. And most of the time, these are files or some kinds of artifacts.
So that begs a question for me of what exactly a multi-cluster job applies. Because if within a given cluster, a job is either complete or not complete, if it's not complete, it needs to be restarted in its entirety. If I have a job running across multiple clusters, what exactly is it doing and how are those results composed? I mean, I know this is a general question, but if you could provide like a specific answer to a use case where a multi-cluster job is valuable, that would really help me.
But for example, we have some kind of data that we can imagine to have a cluster. We have some data pump jobs that, for example, collect the data from the web or whatever, and that push data into the DB, and this is run daily. We may want to run these kind of jobs, and we want to define just the job at the cluster at the federation level, and to propagate for each cluster to propagate the same kind of job, right? That is
okay. So it'd be the idea would be is you'd be running a job on cluster local data.
Yeah.
And okay.
That is
in that case, what does that doesn't imply rescheduling to me. Like that's a cluster local thing. And if I was to say lose a cluster, I don't reschedule the job on a different cluster because probably I'm running it on all the clusters that I need to run it on already, and they have to run on that cluster to get that cluster's data.
Yeah, that is one case, for example, when you want to populate DB or extract some statistics, something. This is probably the simplest case. But now on top of my head, I cannot find an example. Sorry, go ahead, man.
No, that's helpful because to me, the case you're describing is really the non-scheduled version of the job.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really require any advanced scheduler. You want to run it everywhere because you want results collated from each cluster. So Irfan, do you have any examples that use the advanced scheduling capability so I could understand sort of that scenario?
Yeah, so some use cases that have come across are based on analytics capabilities or analytics jobs which basically need to be run in different clusters using some cluster local data, and they are sort of repeatedly run. So the completions might be very high, like I can't really put a number to that, but there would be some defined completions, a very high number of completions. And so if, say, a cluster is unavailable, then the same kind of completions need to be done somewhere else. Parallelism is completely arbitrary. Like if you have a single job running, a single parallel case running in one cluster, then those completions will take maybe days or months to complete.
I wasn't quite clear on the example. You mentioned that it would be running analytic data with local cluster data. Can you repeat that? I'm not sure I understood.
So when I say analytics, it's something like the exact case what we were exploring earlier was utility of this federation itself in kind of edge clusters. So you have small clusters, edge clusters based on edge clusters which are local to say edge kind of scenarios, and I do not have the exact description of that use cases, but that's the kind of rough use case we got from the edge teams that they have, that they need to run some edge workloads or utilities in those edge clusters, and those results are to be submitted to some central entity, and how many times or what kind of results are controlled by the central entity, which is our central cloud cluster or the master cluster of those edge clusters.
So would it be fair to say that similar to Dario's example, it's not a matter of scheduling jobs that can run anywhere. It's a matter of scheduling jobs that need to run on a certain set of clusters because they're collecting data from that cluster or that cluster's immediate network vicinity.
It's sort of, you're sort of right, yeah.
Okay, now I'm just trying to understand like what are the requirements for scheduling, and it sounds like it's not so much about I have arbitrary, work that can be done anywhere. It's that I need to have, a certain type of work done in, this set of clusters.
Yeah,
And for some reason it doesn't. Sorry, keep going.
sorry, but we have also example of some jobs that can run in any cluster and may want to run in multiple clusters to be sure that to have the data at the right time, right? For example, I don't know, statistic. Sorry, I needed to speak about our specific use case, but for example, when we want to collect the data, we've got to have a specific kind of food on airplanes or on flights, and we run daily these kind of jobs and collect this data. And we may want, for example, if we have a cluster in US and a cluster in Europe, we may want to run this job once in both clusters to be sure that data is going to land at the right time. So in that case, for example, the DB is the same, the data produced is going to be the same if we are lucky, and that probably is not an advanced example of scheduling, but is an example of task that we may want to run in both clusters at the same time.
That sounds like a very similar use case where you're running jobs and they have data local to the cluster
Yeah.
that they're collating. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that, there aren't use cases that involve, a workload that can just run anywhere. It just sounds like the examples we have today are more about we want to run in specific clusters. And so scheduling is more about making sure that for a given job, all of the targeted clusters run that job and complete it. And to me, I think that's helpful, because then when we're trying to solve the problem of like immutability, it's really not a matter of like I need to take this job and move it somewhere else. It's more like if this job doesn't run for whatever reason, I just need to restart it. And the scheduler's job isn't really about reapportioning work so much as just making sure that every cluster that is in the scheduling preferences is getting that job and running it. And it sort of, I don't know. I mean, the thing that I'm a little bit confused about is what does the scheduler provide over like manually saying I want this job to run in these clusters by setting, placement for those clusters? Like, is the scheduler going to be determining the size of the job, like the number of pods that will? I mean, I guess that makes sense. If you have a really big cluster, then you can afford to run, more pods and potentially complete faster, given the size of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Marun, so if to define the task of the scheduler, the objective that we did put aside at our team was to be able to, as you mentioned, partition the job into all the clusters, which might be many, and ensure that the completions are achieved in the minimal possible time given the resources of the clusters.
So when you say partition the job, I'm not sure that makes sense.
No, I don't mean necessarily.
Yeah,
I mean, that was in
using
context of V1. Partition was in the context of V1.
Right,
We can
okay.
say define the job right now, and that definition is used using that job scheduling preferences or whatever. So the target is this, that a definition should be given, or the scheduler should be able to run the job in the among the given resources or around the given resources of all the clusters that you have, and achieve or complete the completions or the task at hand in the minimal possible time, which is arbitrary, which might differ based on the availability of the clusters and how jobs respond in the cluster and all, which is totally not in a human's control.
So I think that what I'm still struggling with a little bit is how you would determine, say, the completion count or the parallel. What is it? You can define how many run in parallel and how many total. What I'm a little bit confused about is the way that I conceive of jobs thus far, and maybe it's influenced by V1, is that you have like a total number of completions and you have a total number of like what is the field?
Parallelism.
Parallelism. So parallelism and completions, and then you can define like weights for a given cluster, or how?
Yeah, weights for only the weights for given cluster, nothing else. So proportional,
Right.
it's weights is basically the proportionality of the cluster. So you can say that cluster 1 probably is a small cluster, so you give it a ratio of 1, and cluster number 2 is twice the size of cluster 1, so you can give it a ratio of 2. So the distribution would happen in the ratio of 1:2.
And I guess like in the case where I just need to run like all the jobs in all the places, like that mechanism of proportionality, I'm kind of confused by it. Like it would seem that I would be better off just defining like a hard number for each cluster rather than defining some variable weight, or I would have a way of like rather than having a total and then having a pool, like just giving like a relative weight, like this cluster deserves. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm struggling with like, and I guess I'm curious. When you schedule, sorry, Dario, when you schedule jobs across clusters, do you think, what do you think of the idea of having a total number and then just apportioning it by weight versus having some other mechanism for computing, like how many parallelism and completion should be for each cluster? Is that question clear?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not sure if we have that use case, but I would say that what you mentioned before, and the size of the cluster could be an example of this. Then are we going to use? We may want to use this. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it could make sense, the fact that having big cluster may bring to high parallelism and high concurrency, right? But I don't know. I have a time to map this on our reality here at Amadeus, currently at least.
I mean, it might be. I'm just kind of wondering whether we should just consider that model, because I think it makes complete sense if we're talking about arbitrary workloads that can just be distributed anywhere. But I'm not sure. It doesn't make as much sense to me, but I'm not a user, to apportion a pool based on a weight, when really I need to run everything in all the clusters, and the only variability is, you know, how big a job can I run in a given cluster given its size and how loaded it is.
But anyway, for example, I remember that the Google example is something, copyright detection on YouTube video or something like that. In that case, could make sense, right?
Right. Yeah. I just think it seems like, to me, those are two sort of separate modes of scheduling. One is like truly batch, and one is more, I don't know the word for it, but it's more specific to the clusters. It's not, I can't run anywhere. I have to run in these clusters, and the only variability is how fast can I run with how many pods. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, what you're saying, Maru, that is correct. And I did not get a direct use case for the latter. That is, that's the how many or what was the size of the workload and how fast I can finish. But we had examples of such workloads, especially relevant to the scientific workloads, which were presented. Some folks came to our multi-cluster community also and then presented that use case, which is the perfect example of this kind of a scenario, where there's a huge pool of clusters that they have, Kubernetes clusters, and they basically need to run a batch of scientific workloads across these clusters. And their whole sole aim is to ensure the fastest completions of all the overall workload across these clusters. And the variable for the clusters might be only size, or probably how fast the nodes over there, probably computationally fast, or they have more specific workload CPUs, that kind of stuff. So
that's fair. I take your point that it, just because, you know, we don't have the use case or users with the use case in this meeting. It doesn't mean the use case doesn't exist. I think I would just like it just suggests to me that maybe there's two different schedulers, or at least like different flavors of scheduling. One that is about, you know, making sure that things, it's almost like a daemon set version of a job, like you have to run in all these clusters sort of thing, versus I can just run anywhere and I just want to get it done as fast as possible. And I think at least, to me, it would be helpful at least to just sort of identify the use case the scheduler is targeting and be able to have, because I think those are separable problems. You're going to do one or the other. You're not going to do both at the same time for a given job. Like you can have maybe multiple jobs that use different forms of scheduling. But I would just want to avoid the potential of, you know, someone saying like, I have this use case, is Federation going to solve it? And if we're like, well, you just have to fit your problem into our solution, whether or not it actually is a good fit. Versus we have a really good solution for this problem, and if you want a solution for this problem, we can do that too. If we get enough, you know, demand for it, then that's totally an option. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And actually, what you are saying, see, thinking about the possibility of various use cases and trying to fit that into the solution that we are providing, the approach that we took and the solution that I actually was working on is try to implement or try to work on something which is doable as of now, which is doable and useful to the known use cases that we have. So this current whatever I have pushed, the PR, that seemed like the most simple implementation, and the further use cases can be built as different controllers or different APIs or add on to this. That is what was in our mind, I mean, my mind at least, to be specific, to go ahead with this feature. Yeah, if there is a mandate that it's not useful at all to anybody, then we can think about implementing it in a different way.
But my suggestion wasn't that it wasn't useful. It's more that I wanted to clarify what problem we were trying to solve. And yeah, I mean, the example of a batch workload, I think it's well suited to that, where it's about getting as much work done as possible, you know, on as many different clusters as possible. And when I think about having like multiple ways to schedule jobs, then it's a matter of like, well, how do we coordinate those? Maybe that's getting ahead though. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, you know, the current implementation be blocked. I just wanted to be clear on like why it was necessary to say modify completion, or not modify, but to deal with completions in the way that you're proposing. It makes sense to me now if we're talking about a batch sort of case. Being able to do that, I guess, makes sense. I mean, I think the challenge is that ideally we would be validating this approach with the batch users you're talking about. Like if the use cases that we have immediately at hand are more focused on just distributing workloads to specific clusters, we have a better chance of solving that problem well because we're the consumers of that solution. If instead we're not really the consumers of a batch-centric solution, then ideally we go engage the people that are, so we make sure what we're delivering is actually solving their problem. So maybe as part of this implementation, we could re-engage the folks at CERN and see if they're interested in providing some insight.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. I mean, I can do that.
Okay, cool. This has been really helpful. I appreciate your patience in going through this with me and tolerance of everybody else who may or may not have been interested or
I found this personally to be really helpful in terms of one, understanding actually, you know, like various things that were covered in the discussion, but then also the idea that we can have separate higher level schedulers that accomplish different things, I think is a really powerful concept. And I think that's good because it avoids, the need to make one thing that is universally flexible, which tends not to work out very well. So I'm very supportive of like schedulers and higher order constructs that have narrow use cases that they accomplish, and a multiplicity of those different things for different purposes. I think that's a great idea. I am thinking that we will hit probably some issues around mutability elsewhere that we'll probably need to talk through again. But this has been a good discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to Maru and Paul and Dario for your inputs. One more thing I have been missing since a meeting or two, which I wanted to bring up. We have a good number of issues, and like in this meeting also at some point, I think Paul pointed out that there are some new developers interested, or like Guangia already is on board, and there are a couple of other folks who did contact me, probably at Red Hat also. Some people might have contacted you guys. Uh, uh, can we classify issues with something like help wanted, which might be good fit for new guys trying to get their hands dirty? I did that
Yeah.
exercise initially, but I think the number of issues have grown a lot since then.
I am definitely supportive of tagging things as help wanted or good first issue, and I would be happy to take a pass through myself and see if I can identify ones that are good, or Maru, maybe you would have a better idea of which are actually good first issues than myself. I'm fully supportive of that idea.
And one more thing that might come out of that exercise is that we might have a lot of issues which either are getting stale or are too big to be addressed as a single issue, which can be partitioned into multiple smaller ones, which people can take stabs at. And documentation is the other thing, like Paul, you mentioned, that there is a lot of documentation that can be done, and which certainly stands out as a good first issue for new developers. Of course, giving reference to some existing doc.
Yeah, doc is good first issue stuff. I think people have different affinities for producing it, and not everybody is interested in writing doc. So a good mixture of like doc and code things as first issues would be really healthy to have.
Awesome. So just request to all the active folks, they can just browse the issues and see. And if I think almost everybody we are talking about have permissions to put labels and all, they can label so.
All right, well, we're at time now.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Irfan for leading the meeting.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
See you next
thanks,
time.
folks.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.